You want to start a business.
I do. Should I buy a domain?
We can talk about it. Welcome to Horses with Horns. My name is Indranil.
I'm Nicholas.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about starting a business. But first, how have you been?
Dude, it's been pretty good. This week was better than the one before. A relative in my family just had a bit of a health crisis, but much better now.
Okay.
How about you?
Good. Thankfully, no health crises, so that's good. But yeah, glad they're doing better.
Thank you. It happens. There's a lot more important things than work and business and starting a business or stopping any other kind of thing project that you're running. Check on your family and your friends. Health is very important.
Definitely. Do that first. But if you do want to start a business, we're going to talk about that. Today, we're going to talk through why you might want to start a business. Do you start with the idea? Do you start by wanting to start a business? Just how do you even get started? And, if you have a job right now, what's wrong with that? Why not just stay employed? So.
Yeah. So what's wrong with that? Just theoretically, there's nothing wrong with being employed because for every person that wants to start a business and needs to hire people, some people are going to have to want to be employed, right? So, of course, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be employed. Though I will say, and hopefully this doesn't take us on a tangent, that many people's perspective on their career is changing to a business owner mindset, right? Where they think of their work as providing a service to a company, to an employer, or to other people, full-time, part-time, fractionally, who knows? It's really changing.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people are shifting, even just from full-time work to part-time. I've seen, but definitely, I've definitely seen a trend where people are looking to either own their own business or at least get started doing something for themselves.
One thing that I would say, especially in the pandemic, a lot of people started businesses, right? They were spending a lot of time at home, not doing anything. Look at us. We are starting a podcast, right? So very much on that same trend. But one of the things that I discovered in the entrepreneurial business journey is that it's very much a change of mindset, what you're kind of dealing with. I think when you want to start a business, or maybe not before or just getting started, but one of the first things that I realized that really changes is that when you are an employee or an individual contributor or just simply not the business owner, your job is about getting something done. It's results driven to accomplishing something, right? If you work in software, you have to build something. If you're working in HR, then you have to monitor the people that work at the company. There's so many different things, different roles, and different results that ultimately all those results compound to the entire company. But once you become the business owner, especially just getting started, I think it's one of the mindset changes that I had to go through is that you have to realize that it's no longer about doing, and it's about listening, paying attention, discovering opportunities in the market, really listening to what people are saying, trying to get people to talk to you. It's much more artistic and less scientific,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To level set here, I haven't started my own business. I'd say this podcast is probably the first closest attempt to it. But we've both worked together at smaller companies as well as now we've gone through and worked at larger startups. I think the common theme, though, of working early stage, whether you started it, whether you're the founder or, just one of the earlier hires, is that there is that sense of ownership where, you're looking to learn and grow and really get a lot of experience out of it, while also really taking that ownership of this works because I'm here and I'm trying to make it bigger and try to grow it, both for my personal gain, but also for the greater sake of the business.
Yeah, I don't know if all of you have seen the Uber story series. I think it's on Hulu, maybe.
Could be. Not sure.
Excuse me. And there's a scene in the first couple episodes where the founder, the original founder and CEO of Uber, I forget what problem he was facing. Something with the city, I think, a problem with San Francisco not allowing Uber to run.
Probably like a medallion issue.
Yeah. And he was very frustrated, and he turned to the company, he turned to the employees, and he goes, "You guys are not super pumped," which I think it's very interesting because it really showcases how there's a saying, right? Like, it's lonely at the top. And I think, getting onto a business journey is very lonely because, especially in the beginning, a lot of it is about sales. A lot of it is about getting clients. And when you do that, especially when you're an unknown, you're going to hear radio silence, most of all, and then no, and then a few maybes, so it's a lonely, uncertain, very discouraging journey. I've said it before that, when you're an employee or when you have a very defined job, you start the day with a project, and more often than not, when you close the day, you made some progress. Mm-hmm. Getting the business going, you can start at 0 and you close the day at 0. And it's very difficult to turn your mind off, and because it's such a change of mindset. You have to be okay with no change.
So, certainly nothing wrong with being employed. And of course, many ways it is a little easier to be. Considering that you can start the day at 0, end the day at 0 when you are running your own thing, particularly like early stage, maybe you don't have that much money. What do you do? Like, how do you take that step, and what would motivate somebody to actually deal with that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, in my perspective, I think a lot of times, sometimes people go to acknowledging that, if you're a founder, if you want to be a founder, your personality trait has to be like this, you have to be such and such and such. And I'm sure there's some truth to that, but I also think you can grow into learning certain things, right? Grow into learning certain realities in a new position, right? I'm sure risk takers by nature probably do well at becoming founders, but they definitely feel more ready to take that step. I don't necessarily know if they're more successful in the journey of being founders. Yeah, there's some risk taking, but not everything is taking risks. Sometimes there's many times where you have to be cautious, right? So I don't think it's a personality trait necessarily what makes you what separates the people that should start a business and the people that shouldn't. But I do think that the reason why someone should want to start a business should align to, funny enough, something kind of beyond the business, whether it is the people you want to work with. In my case, for instance, I started an IT consulting company with my father. I just thought, my father's a really, really cool guy, really capable guy. And I never really, like most people, I never worked with him, right? And I figure this might be a really good time to get that going. Comes with some side effects, of course, because, family, coworkers, it really blurs lines. But it really came with a desire to just test what it was like to work with him and what seemed like a sound idea.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even for me, I think the company I'm with right now, previous companies as well, one of the biggest and most rewarding things has been the people I get to work with. But also, some of it does come down to the mission and vision of why are we here? Like, what is this business going to be about? So, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that as well. When you are thinking about starting a business, how do you do that? Like, is it the idea? Do you just say, I'm going to start a business? How do you even conceptualize that?
I think I wouldn't necessarily say that you have to have an idea. I think most of the time when I talk to people that are already on the journey, I've noticed that a lot of the times they have this idea of, oh, what if there was a company that did this, right? Like, what if there was this, and so and so could happen. And I think that's 90+% of the motivation and why people decide to do that. I would say though that in my case, for instance, the reason, as I just said, was the people that I get to work with. And the reason why I decided to jump on this podcast with you was the same thing. We have a lot of fun just talking to each other, and we're not necessarily as organized and methodical as we're being right now.
This is our first episode. Give us time.
Yeah. But we do talk a lot about a bunch of stuff, right? So it's definitely about the fun of it. Now, of course, running this makes sense as having other streams of income. If I didn't have other streams of income, I probably wouldn't be talking to any of you right now. But I think there has to be this desire, this moment where, whether it is doing something you like or doing something that that you think is going to work, and finding a way to make it work, right? I think a lot of people started on the side until they decide to jump on it for whatever reason, getting the necessary amount of money to run the business, or just believing in it, or whatever, right? I would say that it's definitely not a straight line. I think it's natural to expect that you start here, you start at step 1, and then you're going to go to 2 and 3. Expect to dip into the negatives, and then come back a little bit, and then expect to dip into the negatives, and you can fall even further down.
Sure.
So I would say it's kind of irrational. In many ways, starting a business, I think, is irrational, though it's important to rationalize it. I think it's in the movie Parasite, Korean movie. I think it won Best Film in 2019, maybe.
Yep.
Really good movie. The father says a couple times, the best plan is no plan, right? And I think that's important to acknowledge, right? Have a plan, knowing that it's most likely not going to work. But it's good to have a plan, not to fail, but preparing yourself to fail. I think knowing that it's not going to be a straight line, and yet you still have to plan, you still have to bring some logic to the illogical steps that you're taking, matters.
I agree. So one thing I will say is that working for, now this is my second company that I've joined around the Series C stage, like where I work right now. I will say that depending how early or late you join a venture, there is probably less risk than you might think. Not true for every business. Some businesses, especially small businesses, you don't have backups. Honestly, like for your consulting business, if you relied on that solely, there can be a considerable degree of risk. You have
100%.
You have to get customers. You have to be bringing in money. Otherwise, it doesn't work. But, depending on the business you're in, I think it really is just about taking that chance and understanding that the worst case scenario is not actually that bad.
Not at all. I think it was listening to an episode of a podcast that I cannot remember. It was many years ago, but they were interviewing the founder of newsletter Morning Brew, Alex
Lieberman.
Alex Lieberman. And I think when he told his journey of starting Morning Brew, at the moment where he made it a business, because it kind of started like a project.
Yeah, I think it was he and Austin started that in college, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So when he shared that moment where he said, okay, I'm going to do this as a company, I'm going to run it, and I'm going to do this full time. He was working in banking, one of the big banks, or it might have been NASDAQ. I don't know. I can't remember.
Like big traditional finance.
Yeah. But I remember it was very interesting to listen to how he said, okay, if the company fails, I have this backup. And if this backup fails, I have this other backup. He had like 5 backups to the company not working. So if I had to answer the overarching question of this episode, right, which is, so you want to start a business? Why? I think the answer is like, I don't know. I just feel like I want to. And it's much more of a feeling. Even if you start with the idea, or even if you say there should be a company that does this and the service or the product looks like this, the reason why you go into it, I think, it's a feeling much more than anything.
I agree. I think for me, whether thinking about starting something or, like even the places I've worked, it has always been a mix of the idea, the industry, kind of like, is this meeting a need that I care about? And I think, like even with this podcast, it serves a few purposes. One is, of course, we get to hang out, we have fun making this, but also like I do feel like that there was a need for kind of a more casual, early stage focused thing that celebrates not just the wins, but also, the companies that didn't do all that well, and just understanding that there are a lot of pathways out there to have business success. And, one thing, we're going to watch a video shortly of a very experienced person in the startup space. Before we do that, one thing I want to say is that a lot of people really get hung up on, does this business work? Like, is it going to work out? They kind of self-reject. And I think it's really important to just kind of remember that it kind of doesn't matter. Like, you probably have more opportunities out there than you think. And, it's okay if it doesn't work. So just try it anyway.
Well, not to go into like a whole different tangent here, but what is working?
That's also true. Yeah. What does it even mean to succeed?
If you build a business and you can pay a salary to yourself, the salary that you want, the salary that you were earning while you were being employed, is that working? Or when you reach that point, does that mean that the business worked? Becoming a millionaire, a billionaire, is that working? Or how do you define that? Selling the business, having some type of exit, not having to work for the rest of your life? I think, when I hear that question, I hear more than the actual question, more than what does work mean, more than what is this result. I hear, will I be comfortable? Will I achieve the level of comfort that I have being employed? That or more, right? I don't want to, say 100% of the time, but I feel that I can almost guarantee no.
Early stage, yeah, no, for sure, no.
Probably, at what stage, though, do you get the comfort of, I come in, 9 p.m., 5 p.m. I'm out, here's my check. Running a business, even if you're running, Goldman Sachs, like, is that relaxing? Probably not, so, and the bigger the company, the bigger the risk of failure, the bigger the risk of making a big mistake,
Or like more consequential anyway. Like, risk is actually probably lower, but like Goldman Sachs fails, that's a problem.
Yeah. When the pandemic started, I noticed that people that were close to the ownership of businesses, they were very stressed out because they know, and they were totally aware that they were dealing with a lot of stress day to day, and there's this thing that they cannot even control, that it's happening. So I don't necessarily, if comfort, if money, or is the definition of this business is working. I feel like I can say that's not going to happen. And I don't necessarily know, or I don't feel like I should say, if that's what you're looking for, then you shouldn't start a business. No, because I don't think you even know what that feels until you do it.
Right. Yeah. And, I feel like the statistics kind of show that because of the pandemic and not necessarily having other options, and also because of this almost like new trend, but also reverting back to a trend that existed probably in the 50s and 60s, people want to work for themselves. They want to have that ownership, and they're willing to take the risk. They're willing that, even if it means some sacrifice of comfort, like just try it anyway.
Yeah, it's funny when you think about the uncertainty trade-off, right? Because when you're employed, you're trading off. Someone is taking on uncertainty. The owner is taking on uncertainty to give you certainty in cash flow with your paychecks. And that certainty translates into, here's the work that I need you to do. In a month, that work could become irrelevant. The business could need something else entirely. But you are a data analyst, and now they have a sales problem. Well, you were hired to do data analysis type of work. So you have the certainty of not necessarily having to be too concerned if that's what the business is going to need. But at the other end, you have the business owner that took a bet on having this need and paying for this need for some type of long-term basis by employing you and others like you. But the business owner has to deal with the uncertainty of figuring out, how to adjust to a different need. A client could say, I don't want to work with you anymore. And maybe your role could become obsolete. But if you were hired as full-time, there's severance and there's, it's not just something you can turn on and off. There is a betting on a particular, even though you have to accept that it's not going to be a smooth ride, you have to commit to one so that you can start building towards something.
Yeah. I feel like that might be a good time to hear from your friend.
Yes. So we're going to hear from Patrick Russo. He and I met, I think, in 2018. We actually met through someone else, and we've remained really close. We get coffee every now and then. And his journey is very interesting. We met when we were both working as data scientists at different companies. He's one of the very few people that answer my, let's get coffee message. And he's been really, really cool to talk to and bounce ideas with and just talk, and he started a company, I think, in 2020. He had a very interesting journey doing that. So why don't we listen from Patrick?
Hi, I'm Patrick Russo. I'm a data scientist turned developer and founder. So I started my career doing empirical macro finance research at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. I became a data scientist at a startup via transportation, then machine learning engineer at the MedNet. I then, in summer 2020, co-founded Open Access and was the CTO. While I was at Open Access, we went through Techstars, raised a pre-seed round, and hired 2 amazing engineers and worked on an awesome product. I left Open Access a few months ago, but they're still doing some amazing things and just released Open Access AI, which I recommend you check out if you're interested in data or data visualization. Now that I've left Open Access, I'm working on a couple bootstrap projects. So why start a business, and what's wrong with being employed? So nothing's wrong with being employed. I've had some amazing jobs and I've loved my coworkers, but mostly what attracted me to creating a startup was that I wanted to solve something new, something that nobody had done before, that nobody was working on, or at least no one had solved. And that's what you're doing when you're building a new company. So what comes first? An idea or a desire to start a business? So it can be either, but definitely don't let the lack of an idea stop you. Many founders I know iterated through several business ideas. They bounced ideas and problems off each other. They spoke to companies or potential customers to learn about their problems, what they need solved. And ideas can change. Companies can pivot. Consider Slack, for instance. The company that created Slack was building an online game before they pivoted to a communication tool that ended up being worth $27 billion. So don't let the lack of an idea prevent you from getting started. So in terms of ideas, I'd even say that while ideas are good, having or seeing a problem is better. By that I mean it's even better to be focused on something that a problem that people have and are willing to pay for a solution for. And that kind of feeds into the next question a little bit. So how do you know it's going to work? Is that even an important question or an excuse? So you do not know at all if it's going to work. All you can do is de-risk your business. Test your hypotheses. Understand what needs to be true for your business to be viable. That goes back to the problem I was talking about a minute ago. If there's a problem that customers have that they're telling you about, that businesses have that they're telling you about, and they express interest in paying for a solution, that might be an idea for a viable business. So in terms of risks and if it's going to work, again, no one knows if it's going to work. Not even investors know if it's going to work. Most startups fail. But learn from your mistakes, fail fast, and pivot. And in terms of kind of making the step into whether or not to create a startup, don't be afraid to take a risk. There's always a reason not to start a business. For one example, I was accepted into a startup generator program February 2020, and as I'm sure you can guess, it was postponed and changed drastically due to the pandemic. But I'm so glad I made that leap. I met a lot of amazing founders, founded an amazing company, and wish you the best with your business.
Cool. So thank you, Patrick. First, that was really good, really helps frame this whole episode super succinct. So thank you again for your time.
One thing that I want to highlight is that as he shared his career, I found that data science is very, very much the opposite of starting a business, especially data science. There's other data work like engineering and architect that I think get a little bit closer to it, but still pretty far away. And the reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of the job of a data scientist is optimizing, right? Finding better ways, more efficient ways of doing things using data, analytics, technology, machine learning, anything that builds upon what it's already happening, right? So I think the journey from data science to business owner covers, it's a big jump. So for anyone out there that is in a similar position, be aware of that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying do it. I'm just saying data science, starting a business, in my experience, very different.
Yeah. A few of the things that he brought up that really resonate with me, though, is, you meet some really cool people when you work on small, early stage businesses. You end up spending a lot of time with them because it is such a time investment to build something. I mean, you and I met at our first company. Mm-hmm. How many years ago was that now? 2014?
No. So you met me through the company at 2016.
16, okay. Yeah. So I was at our first company back in 2014, but I guess met a few years later. But you meet a lot of really cool people. You get to work on some really cool things. And, what I have found throughout the process that also really comes out is that the idea will change. So what you're trying to build at the start, especially your MVP, like the very first version of your product, it kind of doesn't matter. Like early stage investors, first of all, are really investing in you, not the company.
Yeah.
And ideas will change.
That's interesting. I did talk to a VC. I was having coffee with this investor, and he said that actually. He said, I am much more interested in investing in the people because even if the business, if these people, team of founders, the founder is able to build a company that then, is sold to someone else, something else, then that same person in theory is capable of doing it again. Right. So I'm sure there's a lot of things, like I said earlier, personality traits and things like that kind of go into that. But there is the, lack of a better word, like soft skills to go into business ownership. That is much more about the person, I think, than the idea, the problem, the business model, the industry.
Yeah. So I think to kind of sum things up from my end, talking about if you want to start a business, I think it is really, whether you have an idea or not, if it's something that you want to do, just try it. If you have any financial means to try it, whether it's a small test or, you can go get backing for it from an investor, just try it out. Because the thing is, you will figure it out. Things will change over time anyway, because ideas are just ideas. When you actually go to the market, your customers will help you figure it out. Just try it.
Just try it. Like I said earlier, I think starting a business is much more of a feeling than validation of business model ideas or anything like that, because no one's going to be able to give it to you. I also said earlier, right? What is working? What does it mean when the business works? What does it mean when the journey is successful? It can be defined in a variety of ways. So if you feel like starting a business, plan for it, give it a try.
Yeah. And with that, thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.